Welcome to Power User with Crash Long Johns. That's me. In today's video, we're continuing the SharePoint Novice series with list and document libraries by showing you how to create a list, document library, and creating columns in both. What are list and document libraries? A SharePoint list is a collection of data you can share. A document library is a place where you can store files that you and your coworkers can access from any device, work on them together, and easily find them. So let's get started and jump over the computer. Now that we're at the computer, we're back at our Crash Long Johns communication site that we've been building on as we have in the last few videos. Right now, we're going to first focus on the list. So we're going to go to our new, we're going to drop down, we're going to go ahead and select on list. And then later in this video, we'll also get into the document library. So let's first pick list. It's going to pop up, create a list. Now there are various things that you could pick. Blank list, from Excel, from an existing list in SharePoint, and then also templates, which there's a fair amount currently that can be chosen from out of the box. Right now, what we're going to do is we're just going to do a blank list because we want to be able to show you how you would do with a blank list before actually utilizing a template and having to re-engineer and go backwards. So we're going to go ahead and select blank list. We're going to give this a name, which I'm going to call this one PTO request because I'm going to utilize this same list in the next video when we talk about SharePoint list form. And then we're going to give it a description, request PTO. And then I'm going to go ahead and keep the show in site navigation because I want it to show up here so that we have easy access in a future video series. So now we got our list created, and first you'll see that there's a title field, and then there's also says add column. Title is pretty much default out of the box, and also title is a required field preset, which you can always change that, which I'll show that here in a bit. Right now, let's go ahead and get you familiarized with creating a column. In this case, we're going to kind of create this for the mindset of data collection for someone requesting a day off. So we're going to go ahead and add a column. Now we see that we have all these different columns that we could choose from. So what we're going to do is we're going to first pick a person field. We're going to name this requester. We're going to give it a description, requester requesting day off. Go up here and actually spell that correctly there. Thank goodness for spell check. In this case, we do have other options. We're going to go ahead and not do any multiple selections, but we're going to actually tell it that we want this to be required. I'm going to save that. We're going to go ahead and select another column. And this one, we're going to do date and time. We're going to sit there and say day off. And we're going to say requested day off. We're not going to include any time, and we are also going to make that this is required. Going to create another one, and we're going to do another person, and we're going to say requester manager. Who the requester manager is, and we're going to make that required. We're going to do one more here. We're going to do a choice. We're going to call this status. Status of the request. And we're going to put choice of new, pending, and approved. In this case, we're going to do a default of new. And we're going to go ahead and hit save. We're not going to make this one required. So there we have it. We have a requester, day off, request manager, status, and then our title. Now, again, we're going to get more into it in the next video around list form, but this is going to be helping out with that list form to show that example. But again, this is collecting of data And this in cases like for the PTO request. Now, as I mentioned, title is required. And here, we got our column settings where we can rename it, format the column, show hide columns, add a column. But what we're going to have to do is we need to go into the cog, top right, which is our settings. Now we're going to go ahead and click on list settings. In list settings, we see that title is required. Go ahead and click on title. Now we're more in the back end, so a little bit of the classic components of SharePoint versus the modern. We see that we got a title. We can give it a description. We also then could have a default value. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and have this as a default because we're going to go ahead and keep the title. And you don't need to. You can always make it no longer required, and you could remove that from the view. In case we're just going to call this, we're going to default as PTO requests. And then down here, we're going to go OK. And because I did that, then what you'll see on the SharePoint modern side is anytime, which we'll get into when a form is created or an item is created, it's already going to default that to just say PTO request. Then the requirement is met because it would be a required field. If we didn't make it required, again, then nothing would need to be filled in. One thing I do want to show, since we are in the classic piece of the back end of the SharePoint list, and this also goes for SharePoint libraries, is that you can create columns here too. Now, the thing that I want to show is, just so that you're aware of, we're going to hover day off. When I hovered over day off, remember, day off, requester manager, I created on the front end of the modern SharePoint list. At the very bottom, you'll see, it might be small, but what you'll see is at the end of that URL, it says field equals, and it says day off. It's one word. As you see that this is actually showing it as 2 words. Same request manager showing field equals 1, but it's showing space. Well, the reason of that is it did it on the front end of the modern. If I create a column here in the back end, and let's just say I say test spacing, and just do a single line of text, and I go ahead and hit OK. Yes, it did create my test spacing in here, and if I go back to the list, you'll see test spacing has been created. However, if we go back to our list settings and we hover over test spacing, now look at the field name. It has test_x0020_. What happens is on the back end, when you create something that has a space, it puts in this x0020 business into the field name, which when all of a sudden we get you to the point where you're familiar with being able to do like Power Apps and Power Automates and things like that, this could give you some hiccups because you have to put all this stuff in, that underscore piece of the x0020 because it's looking for that specific field name. If you do create a column in the backend, so we'll create another column, and let's say we call this test spacing 2, and again we'll just keep it simple, single line text, and I go ahead and what I did is, before I do that, I almost forgot. Let's just do it test spacing 2 with no spacing. And that way it keeps us from having that _0020. Hit OK. If I got my test spacing 2, you'll see that, hey, it's got test spacing 2. If I go to the modern view of it, there's my test spacing 2. Now watch this. If I go back in to list settings, and again, if you're doing it in the back end, if I go ahead and click on test spacing 2, because I've created it where there was no spacing. Now if I go ahead and space this out and hit OK, now you'll see I got test spacing 2. I hover over it. Field name still all 1. If I go to the modern front end, there's its space 2. So again, Best practice, create your columns on the front end of the modern, because then that way you don't have to remember, oh, I need to like first create it one word, then rename it after it's created, so that way I don't deal with the X0020. So just stay kind of here. But again, there might be things that you do need to get into the back end, which we'll get into that as we again get you further trained up into the SharePoint Novice series, and then get you into the SharePoint Cat 2 series. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to transition over to SharePoint libraries. Now that we're transitioning to the document library, we're back, as you see, on our home page of Crash Long Johns. Now we're going to go ahead and click on the new, and we're going to select Document Library. This opens up Create a Document Library pane. We're going to give this the name. We're just going to call it Crash Long Johns Files and File Testing with Document Library. And I'm not going to show it in navigation. Go ahead and create that. Now that we got our document library created, we see we got the name of the document library. We got a name column, a modified column, and modified by, and we have our add column. We're going to do the same, similar to what we did for the SharePoint list. And we're going to add some columns. Let's pick a choice column. We're going to name this one client and name of client. And we're going to say 1 and 2, client 3, and we're going to make that required. Hit save. Let's add another one. Do another choice. Let's call this area the file matches with. Let's say accounting, sales, or warehouse. And we're also going to make that required. And we're going to do one more. We're going to do another choice. Now just say status. As a document. Now let's say active. Oh. And inactive. Let's just say retired. There we go. And we're also going to make that required. There we go. So we have a few new columns now that we just created. So we got client, business area, status, and name. So I'm going to go ahead and upload some files here. And we're going to upload 3 files. And we got client 1, client 2, client 3. We see that there are some fields that are asking us that are required. In this case, since they're all selected, now I could take care of all the required fields for all of them at the same time. At this point, now if I do this, they all would have to, if I'm selecting client, it's going to be the same client for all of them, business area for the same, status for the same. In this case, the status is the same for all of them. It's going to be active. So we got our active, but the business area and the client could change. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. That takes care of those. Now what I'm going to do is just unselect, and it's going to give us the client 1. We're going to go that it's client 1, and the business area in this case we're going to say accounting, and we're going to do our next one. Say it's client 2. Oops, that's actually client 3. See, it takes right away. Business area, let's say sales, and last but not least, we got our client 2, and let's just say it's the warehouse. There we have all of our fields filled in. So now what we can do is we can actually sit there and say, okay, now I can actually filter because I have that information filled in, so I can go filter by. I can say, hey, I only want to see sales, apply. Now I just see sales. And then go in here and I can clear out the filter and apply, and everything's back. So ultimately what these columns are doing for you for your documents that you're storing is it's basically what's considered metadata or more data, and you're narrowing that down to a finite level. So that'll help you narrow it down to like, hey, which particular area that these documents might be tied to. You can also see which of those documents are active or been retired, which business areas are tied. The other nice thing too is, let's say that we want to go ahead and let's look at the column settings and let's edit this business area. And let's say that now we're going to do more options. I'm still going to do the drop down, but I'm going to say, hey, allow multiple sections, because you might have like, hey, it might be tied to both accounting and warehouse, or warehouse and sales. So we're going to go ahead and save that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select client 1 and client. We'll just go client 1 for now. I could do edit and grid, which allows me to edit here, grid style, and I could do it that way. And let's see, I can do accounting and sales. I can go warehouse and sales, and then sales down here, and we'll just have sales alone. All right. So we now have sales across all 3 of them, and let's do one more, which also include accounting in this one. So now we got all 3 for client number 2. All right, so let's exit the edit grid. Another area you can do that too is, again, you can select, you can do this little circle with an eye, open the details pane, and you can update it right here, which again, this is going to be pretty quick without hitting a save. It's just going to take effect right away. So now if I do business area and I filter by, and let's go by sales, it's going to show me all of them because they have sales in there. If I say, well, I want to filter by just accounting without sales, just accounting, I should see 2. And then if I go ahead and filter and change it where it's just warehouse and hit apply, now I just see the 1. So that's with the multi-select, so they can, it could be across different things. So again, what this is doing, like I mentioned before, is that metadata, the more data, the more columns that you're creating to help narrow down the scope that it should be to that finite level. It allows you to be able to have those documents where it might overlap in different areas, and then somebody could easily find documents that pertain to what they need. This could also be down to like a team, group, or people. So depending on your situation, what you need it for, but this is what the document library before. And then on top of that, with the document library, open the documents, more than one person could actually work on it together. It gives that great collaboration too. So that gives an overview of the document library. We also reviewed today the SharePoint list. And if you appreciate the video, please give a thumbs up. Also click subscribe. And thank you again for stopping by. Until next time, keep learning.